We need to see the pretty lady with blonde hair. Our daddy sent us. It's really important." The maitre d' at Romano's restaurant stood frozen, staring down at three identical 7-year-olds in matching red jackets. Behind them, the Friday evening dinner crowd had gone quiet, watching the commotion unfold. "Girls, you can't just—" the maitre d' began, but the middle child stepped forward, her blue eyes blazing with determination. "Please, sir, our daddy is Blake Lawson. He's supposed to meet Miss Natalie Bennett here tonight, but he's really sick. We promised him we'd come explain." Across the dining room, a woman in an elegant blue dress looked up from her corner table. She'd been checking her phone for the 15th time, wondering if she'd been stood up. But now, hearing her name, she rose and walked toward the entrance. The children turned as she approached, and the smallest one, the one with a slightly crooked ponytail, gasped, "You're even prettier than Daddy said!" Natalie Bennett, CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire, found herself speechless. In boardrooms, she commanded respect. In negotiations, she never lost her composure. But three tiny girls staring up at her with desperate hope had completely disarmed her. "Are you looking for me?" she asked gently, kneeling down to their eye level. The middle girl extended her hand with surprising formality. "I'm Nina Lawson. These are my sisters Mila and Riley. Our daddy is Blake Lawson, and he's supposed to be here, but he's sick, so we came instead." Before Natalie could respond, an elderly woman burst through the restaurant doors, breathless and frantic. "Girls! Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, miss. I'm Margaret, their neighbor. I was watching them while their father rested, and they just vanished, left me a note saying they had to help their daddy." Natalie looked from the worried neighbor to the three determined faces before her. Most people in her position would have politely excused themselves, written off the evening as a disaster. But something in the desperation in their eyes made her pause. Nina's eyes filled with tears, and she took a small step closer to Natalie. "Please don't be mad at our daddy," she whispered. "He tried so hard to get ready for your date. He picked out 5 different shirts. He was singing in the shower this morning because he was so happy. But then he got sick and couldn't find his phone to call you," and her voice cracked. "Dad's sick, so we came instead." Mila, the quietest of the three, added softly, "He kept saying, 'She's gonna think I don't care.' But he does care. He was so excited to meet you." Riley, the tallest, nodded fiercely. "He really, really wanted to come." Something in Natalie's chest tightened. Here was a man who'd pushed through illness to try to meet her, whose daughters had snuck out to make sure she knew he hadn't abandoned her. In her world of calculated moves and strategic relationships, this kind of raw, honest concern was rare. In that moment, the billionaire CEO had a choice: walk away from the mess, or take a chance on a single father she'd never met, 3 daughters who clearly needed someone, and a love story that began with complete chaos. She chose chaos, and everything changed. She made a decision that would have shocked her board of directors. "Margaret, where do they live?" Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. 20 minutes later, Natalie sat in her Mercedes, 3 chattering girls in the back seat, following Margaret's directions to a neighborhood she'd never visited. The restaurant had packaged up chicken soup with stars and crackers at her request. In the rear-view mirror, she watched the triplets argue about who would carry the soup inside.
"I'm the oldest by 4 minutes, Nina insisted. "But I'm the tallest," Riley countered. "Daddy says it doesn't matter who's oldest or tallest," Mila said quietly. "He says we're a team." "Your daddy sounds like a wise man," Natalie said. "He is," all 3 answered in unison, making her smile. "How long has it been?" Natalie asked carefully. "Since your mother?" She left the question hanging, unsure if it was appropriate, but Nina answered matter-of-factly. 3 years, 2 months, and 6 days. We were 3. I don't remember her voice anymore, just her smell, like vanilla and something else. Cinnamon, Mila added softly. I remember her singing. Not the songs, just The feeling of it. Riley said nothing, but Natalie caught her wiping her eyes in the mirror. And your father has raised you alone all this time? We take care of each other, Nina said, a flash of protectiveness in her young voice. People think Daddy needs help because we don't have a mom, but he's the best daddy in the whole world. He makes our lunches with little notes inside. He learned how to braid our hair from YouTube videos. He comes to every school thing, even when he has to miss work. He sounds wonderful, Natalie said, and meant it. That's why we had to come tell you, Mila explained. He was so excited about tonight, he practiced what he was going to say in the mirror. We heard him from the hallway. What did he practice saying?
The girls giggled. Riley leaned forward conspiratorially. He said, "Hi, Natalie. I'm Blake. I build furniture, and I have 3 daughters, and I'm probably not what you expected, but I hope you'll give me a chance anyway." Natalie felt that tightening in her chest again. When was the last time someone had hoped she'd give them a chance? Usually, people wanted something from her: connections, investments, opportunities. But this carpenter she'd never met just wanted a chance to get to know her. "Turn left here," Margaret called from the passenger seat. "Third house on the right, the blue one." The house was modest, but well-maintained, with a wooden porch swing that looked handmade. The yard was neat, with a tire swing hanging from an old oak tree. Through the front window, Natalie could see children's drawings taped to the refrigerator in the kitchen. This was a home, she realized. Not just a house, but a place filled with love and life and the beautiful chaos of a family. The girls tumbled out of the car before it fully stopped, racing up the walkway. Natalie followed more slowly, suddenly nervous. What was she doing? She was a CEO who'd never even held a baby, walking into a sick stranger's house because his 7-year-old daughters had crashed her blind date. Margaret unlocked the door, and the girls kicked off their shoes in the entryway, clearly a house rule. Natalie noticed the handmade wooden bench by the door, the hooks at child height for coats, the little details that spoke of a father who'd thought about making life easier for small people. "Daddy's room is upstairs," Nina said, taking Natalie's hand with unconscious trust. They led her up a carpeted staircase, past a bathroom covered in princess stickers, and into a master bedroom that was surprisingly tidy for a single father. But it was the man in the bed who captured her attention. Blake Lawson looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. Even flushed with fever, she could see he was handsome in an unpretentious way. Strong jawline, dark hair falling across his forehead, kind eyes that were currently wide with mortification. His t-shirt was damp with sweat, and he struggled to sit up when they entered. "Girls, what?" His gaze landed on Natalie, and his face went from red to white. "Oh no. Oh God, no! Please tell me you didn't—" "We went to the restaurant," Nina announced proudly. "We told Miss Natalie you were sick and couldn't come." "We brought you soup," Mila added, holding up the container. "The pretty lady drove us home," Riley finished. Blake looked like he might actually die of embarrassment. "I am so sorry. I can't believe they—" He turned to his daughters. "We are going to have a very serious talk about leaving the house without permission. But Daddy, you were so sad about missing your date. You kept saying, she's going to think I don't care." "We had to help," Riley added simply. Natalie, who'd spent the car ride trying to figure out what to say, found herself smiling. They were very persuasive and very brave. "Brave? They're grounded until they're 30, Blake said, but there was no real anger in his voice, only exhaustion and mortification. He looked at Natalie with genuine distress. "I'm so sorry. This isn't— I meant to call. I was trying to find my phone, and I must have— I'm making this worse. I should stop talking." "You have a fever," Natalie observed, moving closer. She pressed the back of her hand to his forehead, a gesture so natural she didn't think about it until his eyes widened. "You're burning up. How long have you been sick?" 2, maybe 3 days. I thought it was just a cold." He tried to smile. "Terrible timing, right? First date in 3 years, and I'm too sick to stand up." "First date in 3 years?" Blake's expression shifted. becoming more vulnerable. The girls told you about their mother? A little, in the car. He was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the quilt. Amelia died 3 years ago. Sudden cardiac arrest from an undiagnosed heart condition. She was at the grocery store, laughing on the phone with her sister, and then she just collapsed. His voice cracked slightly. She was only 28, perfectly healthy, or so we thought. The girls were so young, I've been focused on them, on making sure they were okay, that I didn't really think about dating. But Robert, our mutual friend, he insisted I meet you, said you were special. Robert talks too much, Natalie said softly, but she was touched. He said, you specifically wanted to meet someone outside your usual circle, someone who didn't care about the money or the company, just you. Blake met her eyes. Is that true? Natalie found herself nodding. Every man I've dated in the past 5 years has wanted something, a business connection, an introduction to investors, a photo opportunity. I wanted to meet someone who didn't even know what Bennett Industries was. I know what it is. I may have Googled you several times. There's a Wikipedia page and everything. Despite herself, Natalie laughed. Did the Wikipedia page scare you off? Almost. I mean, you're brilliant, successful, beautiful, and I make furniture in a workshop behind my house. I almost canceled 3 times. He gestured weakly around his bedroom. And now you're seeing me at my absolute worst, sweaty, feverish, and with 3 daughters who apparently think it's acceptable to hunt down their father's date.
They love you, Natalie said simply. That's clear.
We do,
Nina confirmed. The girls had arranged themselves at the foot of their father's bed like small sentinels.
Daddy's the best. Even when he's grumpy in the morning, Mila added. And when he burns the pancakes, Riley said with a giggle. I don't burn pancakes that often, Blake protested weakly. Watching them, Natalie felt something shift inside her. This was real. This love, this family, this barely controlled chaos, it was messy and imperfect, and more genuine than anything in her carefully curated life. You need to rest, she said, surprising herself. Have you eaten anything today? Not really. The thought of food. You need to eat something, even if it's just broth. She turned to the girls. Where's the kitchen? Downstairs! They scrambled off the bed, ready to help. Blake tried to protest. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Besides, your daughters went to a lot of trouble to make sure I knew you hadn't stood me up. The least I can do is make sure you don't pass out from dehydration. 30 minutes later, Blake had been coaxed into eating half a bowl of soup and drinking a full glass of water. Margaret had taken the girls downstairs to give them some privacy, and Natalie found herself sitting in a chair beside his bed, neither of them quite sure what to say. Thank you, Blake finally said, for not running away when 3 crazy children crashed your evening. They're not crazy. They're devoted to their father. There's a difference. Still, most women would have left the restaurant and blocked mine and Robert's number. I considered this. Maybe. But most women haven't spent the last 10 years building a company from almost nothing while fighting off board members who thought she was too young, too female, too soft to lead. I don't scare easily. How did you end up running Bennett Industries? Robert mentioned it was your father's company originally. It was failing when I took over at 23, Natalie said, the memory still sharp. My father had a stroke, and the board wanted to sell. I convinced them to give me 6 months. I restructured everything, shifted our focus to sustainable technology, and somehow pulled it off. 10 years later, we're worth more than anyone thought possible. That's incredible. It was necessary, she corrected. My father built that company. I couldn't let it disappear. She paused. I lost my mother when I was 12, a boating accident. My father was shattered, but he channeled everything into the company and into raising me. When he got sick, saving Bennett Industries was the only way I knew to honor both of them. Blake was quiet, studying her face. So we've both lost people, both built our lives around protecting what matters most. I suppose we have. For me, it's the girls. Everything I do, every decision I make, it's about making sure they're okay, that they grow up knowing they're loved, that one tragedy doesn't define their whole lives. That's why you started the furniture business? I was working construction when Amelia died. Long hours, dangerous sites, not great pay. I couldn't do that anymore, couldn't risk leaving the girls orphaned. So I taught myself fine carpentry, started taking custom orders. It's slower money, but I'm home every night for dinner. I don't miss school events. I'm there when they're sick. Usually I'm the one taking care of them, not the other way around. They seem remarkably well adjusted for children who lost their mother so young. They have their moments. Riley still has nightmares sometimes. Mila gets anxious when I'm late coming home. And Nina, he paused. Nina remembers the most. Even though she was so young, she'll see a photo or smell something, and I can see her trying to grasp memories that are fading. It breaks my heart. You're a good father, Natalie said quietly. I'm a tired father, Blake admitted. A father who thought maybe, just maybe, he was ready to let someone new into our lives, and then proceeded to completely blow it by getting sick. You didn't blow it. He looked at her skeptically. I'm in bed, covered in sweat, while you're still wearing your date dress. This is definitely blown. Natalie glanced down at her designer dress, which probably cost more than Blake's monthly rent. She'd chosen it carefully that morning, wanting to look successful but not intimidating. Now it felt ridiculous, too fancy, too formal for this moment of genuine connection. It is a terrible date dress, she agreed. Way too many glitters. Blake laughed, then winced. Don't make me laugh. It hurts. Sorry. She stood up. I should let you rest. But Blake. Yeah? Once you're better, let's try this again. A proper date. Somewhere the girls can't stage an intervention. His eyes widened. You still want to? Why wouldn't I? Because this has been a disaster? Because I have 3 daughters who apparently have 0 boundaries? Because I'm a carpenter who makes chairs while you run a billion-dollar company? Natalie leaned against the doorframe, considering. Do you know what I did this morning? I sat through a 4-hour board meeting where 12 men talked over me and questioned every decision I've made in the past quarter. Then I answered 83 emails, most of them demanding things I don't have time to give. Then I went home to my empty penthouse and ate takeout alone while reviewing projections for our Tokyo expansion. She paused, letting that sink in. And then I came here. Your daughters hijacked my evening, your neighbor looked at me like I might be a serial killer, and I ended up sitting beside your bed feeding you soup. And you know what? This has been the most real, most honest evening I've had in years. So yes, Blake Lawson, I want a proper date. I want to know more about the man who makes his daughter's lunch notes and learns to braid hair from YouTube videos.
Blake stared at her, something like wonder in his feverish eyes. I'm going to think this is a fever dream when I wake up. Then I'll bring more soup tomorrow to prove it's real. You don't have to do that. I know, but I want to. Besides, I need to make sure you're well enough for this date you're promising me. From downstairs, they heard a crash followed by 3 identical voices saying, Sorry, Margaret, in unison. Blake closed his eyes. I'm never going to live this down, am I? Probably not, Natalie agreed cheerfully, but I have a feeling it'll make a good story someday. As she headed downstairs, Blake called after her. Natalie? She turned back. Thank you for not running away, for understanding that my life is complicated. Complicated is good. Perfect is boring. The girls were waiting at the bottom of the stairs, and the coffee table was covered in construction paper, markers, glitter, and glue. A trail of gold glitter led from the table to the couch, and all 3 girls had sparkles in their hair and on their clothes. We made you something, Nina announced, holding up a handmade card. It was covered in so much glitter that it was shedding like a golden snowstorm. Natalie took it carefully. The front read, Thank you, Miss Natalie, in wobbly letters, with hearts and stars drawn around it. Inside, each girl had signed their name with a different colored marker. It's beautiful, Natalie said, genuinely touched. We used all the glitter, Mila admitted, gesturing to the empty containers scattered across the table. All of it, Riley emphasized. There's none left in the whole house, maybe even the whole neighborhood. And now it's everywhere, Nina added, looking at the sparkling trail on the carpet. Natalie laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Glitter has a way of doing that. How about we try to clean it up together before your dad sees his living room turned into a disco ball?
They scrambled to help, tiny hands carefully gathering scattered markers and glue sticks while Natalie folded up the construction paper. Margaret brought the vacuum for the glitter, though they all knew from experience that glitter never truly disappeared. 10 minutes later, with the living room mostly restored and all three girls still sparkling like little disco balls themselves, Natalie glanced at her watch. "Your father's going to rest now," Natalie told them, tucking the handmade card carefully into her purse. "And I'm going to go home. But I'll check on him tomorrow, okay?" "Promise?" Riley asked, taking her hand. "I promise." "Are you going to be our daddy's girlfriend?" Nina asked directly. "Nina!" Mila elbowed her sister. "You can't just ask that." "Why not? We like her. Daddy likes her. She seems nice." Natalie knelt down, meeting 3 pairs of hopeful blue eyes. "I like your daddy too, but these things take time. We need to get to know each other first." "But you will come back?" Riley pressed. "I will come back." "Good," all 3 said together, and Natalie realized she'd just made a promise to 3 6-year-olds who would absolutely hold her to it. As she drove home that night, her designer dress wrinkled and her carefully styled hair falling out of its pins, Natalie thought about the evening she'd expected versus the one she'd had. She'd anticipated polite conversation, maybe some chemistry, possibly a goodnight kiss if things went well. Instead, she'd been hijacked by 3 children, fed soup to a feverish carpenter, and made promises she had no idea how to keep. By all accounts, it should have been a disaster. So why did she feel more alive than she had in years? Blake woke the next morning feeling marginally more human. The fever had broken sometime in the night, leaving him weak but clearer-headed. For a moment, he thought the previous evening had been a fever dream, until he saw the soup container on his nightstand and the note beside it. "Get some rest. I'll call later. N." Real. It had been real. Natalie Bennett had sat beside his bed, had listened to his daughter's chaos, had promised to come back. Blake pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, torn between embarrassment and disbelief. His bedroom door creaked open. 3 blonde heads peeked through. "Daddy, you alive?" Nina asked. "Barely," he croaked. "Come here, you 3. They piled onto the bed, careful not to jostle him too much. Blake wrapped his arms around them, breathed in the smell of their strawberry shampoo, and prepared for the conversation he'd been dreading. "We need to talk about last night." "We know," Mila said quietly. "We're sorry." "We just wanted to help," Riley added. "You could have been hurt," Blake said, trying to keep his voice gentle but firm. "You left the house without permission. You went to a restaurant in the dark. Anything could have happened." "But nothing did," Nina pointed out. "And Miss Natalie wasn't mad. She was nice." "That's not the point. The point is—" He stopped, realizing he was arguing with the logic of 6-year-olds. "The point is, I need to be able to trust you. When I tell you to stay with Margaret, I need to know you'll stay with Margaret." "Even if you're sad?" Riley asked in a small voice. Blake's heart clenched. "Even if I'm sad. You 3 are the most important things in my world. If something happened to you because you were trying to take care of me—" His voice broke. "I couldn't survive that. Do you understand?" They nodded solemnly. Nina's eyes were wet.
"We're sorry, Daddy. We really are. We haven't seen you happy in so long. And yesterday morning when you were singing in the shower and trying on all those shirts, you looked happy. We wanted you to stay happy." Blake pulled them closer, blinking back his own tears. How could he be angry when they'd done it out of love? When they'd seen his loneliness even when he tried to hide it? "I appreciate that you care about my happiness, but I'm the parent, remember? It's my job to take care of you, not the other way around." "Can't we take care of each other?" Mila asked. Blake thought about that. About the past 3 years of learning to braid hair and pack lunches and help with homework while grieving a love he'd thought would last forever. About how many times the girls had made him laugh when all he wanted to do was cry. About how they'd become a team, the 4 of them, against the world. "Yeah," he said finally. "Yeah, we can take care of each other, but that means respecting rules, okay? No more great escapes." "Okay," they chorused. "Now, who wants to tell me exactly what happened at that restaurant?" The story poured out in overlapping voices, how they'd waited until Margaret went to the bathroom, how they'd grabbed their coats and used the code door Blake thought they didn't know, and how they'd walked the 6 blocks to Romano's in the dark because they'd heard him mention the name. 6 blocks? Blake's heart nearly stopped. In the dark? "We stayed together," Nina said defensively, "and we looked both ways before crossing streets." Blake rubbed his face. He was going to need a stronger lock on that door. And maybe therapy. Definitely therapy.
So we got to the restaurant, Riley continued the story, and the man in the fancy suit didn't want to let us in, but we told him it was important, and then Miss Natalie heard us and came over. "She's really pretty, Daddy," Mila sighed, "like a princess in a movie, but nicer than most princesses." "And she wasn't even mad," Nina added. "She ordered you soup and drove us home and everything." "She was worried about you," Riley said. "You could tell. She kept asking if you'd eaten, if you had medicine, if someone should call a doctor." Blake lay back against the pillows, processing this. A woman he'd never met had taken 3 strange children to their sick father's house, had fed him soup, had sat beside his bed talking until he could barely keep his eyes open. Who did that? Someone special, apparently. Someone who saw 3 scared little girls trying to help their father and responded with kindness instead of annoyance. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Natalie. "Hi, Blake. How are you feeling?" Blake stared at the message, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. She'd actually meant it. She was actually checking on him. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. "What did you say to a billionaire CEO who'd seen you at your absolute worst? Thank you seemed inadequate. Sorry seemed pathetic." Everything he typed looked wrong. Finally, he settled on simple honesty. "Mortified, but alive. My daughters are grounded until college. Thank you for being so kind to them and to me." Her response came quickly. "They're wonderful. You're wonderful. Stop being mortified. How about that proper date next Saturday, 7 p.m.? Blake showed the message to his daughters, who erupted in squeals and bounced on the bed.
Next Saturday is perfect. I promise to be vertical this time. Vertical is good. Also, fair warning, I'm coming by this afternoon with more soup to make sure you're actually resting. Doctor's orders. You're not a doctor. CEO's orders, then. See you at 3. Blake looked at his grinning daughters. What have I gotten myself into? True love, Nina declared dramatically. She doesn't even know me yet. But she will, Mila said with the confidence of someone who'd already decided how the story would end. Natalie showed up at exactly 3 p.m., dressed down in jeans and a cashmere sweater that still somehow looked effortlessly elegant. Her hair was loose today, soft waves brushing her shoulders, and she carried a paper bag from the local deli along with a brightly colored board game tucked under her arm. "I come bearing soup and entertainment," she announced as Margaret opened the door. 3 blonde heads popped out from behind the couch like a row of meerkats. "Miss Natalie!" they shrieked in unison. Blake, who had managed to shuffle downstairs in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, nearly tripped when they bolted toward her. Girls, gentle, too late. They crashed into Natalie's legs, wrapping around her so fiercely she staggered back a step, laughing. "Well, this is the best welcome I've had in years." "We cleaned the house," Nina declared proudly. "Mostly," Mila corrected. "Riley spilled juice, but we fixed it," Riley added. Natalie glanced at Blake with a teasing smile. "Sounds like you run a tight ship." He rubbed the back of his neck, more like a ship held together with glitter and optimism. That sounds like the best kind. He hadn't expected her to come, not really. People said things when emotions were high, when chaos softened their edges, but they usually stepped back into their own world once things settled. But here she was, Hands full, sleeves rolled up, stepping into their messy little life like she belonged.
The girls materialized instantly, drawing by Natalie's presence like moths to flame. They dragged her into the living room, fighting over who got to sit next to her, explaining in overlapping voices everything they'd done that day. Blake watched from the kitchen doorway, heating up the soup she'd brought. There was something surreal about seeing Natalie Bennett, a woman whose company stock price he couldn't begin to calculate, sitting cross-legged on his worn carpet while Riley showed her a drawing and Mila explained the plot of the book she was reading. "Your dad tells me you're grounded," Natalie was saying with mock seriousness. "That's rough." "We know," Nina sighed. "No TV for a whole week." "We had to do it, though," Mila said. "Daddy was so sad about missing his date." "I wasn't sad," Blake called from the kitchen. "I was concerned about being rude." "You were sad," all four females said in unison, making him laugh. Natalie glanced over at him, and their eyes met. Blake felt it again, that spark of connection, of possibility. She smiled, and he smiled back. And somewhere in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. This could be real. This could be something. They ate soup together, the five of them in the living room with Blake stretched out on the couch. The girls insisted he needed to stay comfortable. Natalie sat cross-legged on the floor by the coffee table, and the girls squeezed in around her, creating an intimate circle that felt more like a family gathering than an awkward first meeting.
Natalie listened intently as the girls described their school projects, asked intelligent questions about their interests, and didn't flinch when Mila accidentally spilled juice on her expensive jeans. "It's just clothes," she said with a shrug, when Blake tried to apologize. "I have a whole closet full. It's not important." "But those jeans probably cost—" "Blake," she cut him off gently, "it's really okay. I'd rather have fun with your daughters than worry about designer labels." After dinner, she produced the board game, something called headbands that involved wearing headbands with cards you couldn't see. The girls loved it, and Blake found himself laughing more in 2 hours than he had in months. As evening approached and the girls started yawning, Natalie glanced at her watch. "I should go. Let you all get some rest." "You don't have to," he said, then immediately felt foolish. "I mean, you probably have things to do, important CEO things." "Actually, I cleared my schedule for today. Told my assistant I had a personal emergency. Making sure a sick carpenter eats his soup counts as a personal emergency in my book." The girls insisted on a group hugging her before she left, making her promise to come back soon. At the door, Blake walked her out to her car, still moving carefully. "Thank you," he said, "for today, for yesterday, for not running screaming when you saw what a circus my life is. I like circuses. They're full of life and joy and unexpected moments. My life is scheduled down to the minute. Everything is predictable, controlled. This," she gestured back toward the house, "this is messy and chaotic and completely unplanned. It's wonderful. You might change your mind after our actual date," Blake warned, "when I'm not sick and can actually embarrass myself properly."
"I'm looking forward to it." She paused, her hand on the car door. "Blake, I meant what I said yesterday, about wanting to get to know you. This isn't charity or curiosity. I like you. I like your daughters. I like the life you've built." "I'm still not sure why," Blake admitted. "You could date anyone. CEOs, investors, people who summer in the Hamptons, or whatever it is rich people do." "I've dated those people. They're boring." She smiled. "You're different. You're real. When you look at me, you see Natalie, not the Bennett Industries CEO or the woman on magazine covers. You see me." Blake took a small step closer. "I do see you, and I like what I see." For a moment, he thought about kissing her, but he was still recovering from fever, probably had terrible breath, and they hadn't even been on a real date yet. So instead, he took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Saturday. I promise to be showered, healthy, and as impressive as a single dad carpenter can be." "Can't wait," she said, squeezing back. Saturday arrived with nerve-wracking speed. Blake had spent the intervening days recovering,
working on a custom dining table in his workshop and coaching himself for the date. The girls had been surprisingly helpful, offering fashion advice and practicing conversation with him. "Don't talk about work too much," Nina instructed as she helped him choose a shirt. "Ask her questions about herself. And smile. You have a nice smile." "But not too much," Riley cautioned. "You don't want to look creepy." Blake looked at his 6-year-old daughters in amazement. "Where are you learning this stuff?" "TV," they said together. "We're definitely limiting your TV time," he muttered. But he took their advice. Dark jeans, a button-down shirt in deep blue, his good watch. He'd even gotten a haircut. Margaret arrived at 6:30 to watch the girls, who made him promise to tell him everything when he got home. As he headed for the door, Nina called after him. "Daddy, we really like her. Don't mess it up." "Thanks for the confidence, sweetheart." "You won't mess it up," Mila said loyally. "You're the best daddy ever. She already knows that."
Blake drove to the restaurant Natalie had suggested, a small Italian place in her neighborhood, nothing fancy. She was waiting outside, and Blake's breath caught when he saw her. She wore a simple beige dress, her hair down around her shoulders, minimal makeup. She looked beautiful, yes, but more than that, she looked happy to see him. "You're vertical," she observed with a grin. "As promised, and I even managed to look presentable this time. Well, as presentable as a carpenter can get." Natalie laughed, linking her arm through his. "Come on, I'm starving." Dinner was easy in a way Blake hadn't expected. They talked about everything: his furniture business, her company's latest sustainability initiative, their childhoods, their favorite books. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by shared laughter and the comfortable silences that came when two people simply enjoyed being together. "Can I ask you something?" Blake said over dessert. "Why did Robert set us up? I mean, specifically, what did he tell you about me?" Natalie swirled her spoon through her tiramisu. "He said you were kind, that you'd been through hell and came out the other side still believing in goodness. He said you were raising 3 daughters alone and doing a beautiful job of it." She met his eyes. "And he said you deserved to be happy again, but you'd never pursue it yourself because you didn't think you deserved it." Blake felt his throat tighten. "Robert talks too much." "Maybe, but he's not wrong, is he? About the last part?" Blake was quiet for a moment, considering. "After Amelia died, I thought that was it for me. I had my one great love, we had our daughters, and then she was gone. I focused on being the best father I could be, building a business that would support us, making sure the girls knew they were loved. The idea of dating, of letting someone new into our lives, it felt disloyal somehow, like I was trying to replace her. And now? Now I realize that loving someone new doesn't erase what I had with Amelia. The girls will always be her daughters, and I'll always be grateful for the years we had together. But that doesn't mean my story has to end there." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Meeting you, even in the completely mortifying way it happened, it reminded me that I'm still alive, that I'm still capable of feeling this spark." Natalie's fingers intertwined with his. "I feel it too. This spark." They talked until the restaurant staff started giving them pointed looks. Even then, they lingered on the sidewalk outside, neither quite ready for the evening to end. "I should get back," Blake finally said. "Margaret charges extra after midnight, and knowing my daughters, they're probably still awake waiting to hear every detail." "They'll want a full report," Natalie agreed with a smile. "They will, especially about whether I embarrassed myself." "You didn't, not even close." She looked up at him, the streetlight casting a soft glow around them. "This was perfect, Blake. Just talking, laughing, being ourselves. I can't remember the last time a date felt this easy." "Easy is good," Blake said softly, taking a small step closer. "Though I should warn you, my life is rarely easy. 3 daughters, a small business, a house that always needs something fixed. It's chaotic and messy and real," Natalie interrupted gently. "Blake, I spend my days in boardrooms with people who've rehearsed every word. Everything is calculated, strategic, controlled. But this, tonight, with you,
It's honest. It's alive. I don't want easy. I want real. Blake looked at her, really looked at her. Not the billionaire CEO, not the woman on magazine covers, but Natalie, the woman who'd sat beside his bed feeding him soup, who'd played board games with his daughters, who was looking at him now like he was worth choosing.
"Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you'd never ask." The kiss was soft, sweet, and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Natalie was smiling. "Saturday date number 2?" she asked. "How about Wednesday dinner? The girls have been begging to see you again." Even better. Wednesday became a regular thing. Then Saturdays. Then random weeknight drop-ins when Natalie finished work early or Blake needed a second opinion on furniture design. Slowly, carefully, she became woven into the fabric of their lives. She came to Nina's piano recital and watched Blake try not to cry when his daughter played her piece perfectly. She helped Riley with a science project, using her company's lab resources to make it spectacular. She sat with Mila for hours, reading beside the quiet child who just needed calm presence more than conversation. The triplets tested her, as children do. Mila declared she didn't like vegetables one dinner, clearly expecting Natalie to cave. Instead, Natalie calmly ate her own vegetables, then Mila's, then asked for seconds. "These are too delicious to waste," she declared, and by the end of the meal, all 3 girls were eating their broccoli, determined not to let Natalie have all the good stuff. Blake watched from the kitchen, amazed. "You're a natural at this." "I'm winging it," Natalie admitted. "But they make it easy. They're so honest about what they need, what they're feeling. In my world, everyone has an agenda. With them, it's refreshingly simple." 3 months in, Natalie faced a work crisis. A major deal in Tokyo was collapsing, and she needed to fly out immediately. She came to Blake's house the night before her flight, stress radiating from every line of her body. "I'll be gone at least 2 weeks, maybe 3. The deal's falling apart, and I'm the only one who can save it. I know we had plans for Riley's birthday, and I'd promised Nina I'd help with her book report, and—"
Blake caught her hands, stopping her mid-pace. "We'll be here when you get back." "But, Natalie, we'll be here. The girls understand you have important work. Hell, they think it's cool that you're flying to Tokyo to save a billion-dollar deal. Go! Do what you need to do. We'll still be here." She looked at him, her eyes shining. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Besides, absence makes the heart grow fonder, right?" "I don't think my heart could get any fonder," she said softly. The girls made her videos every day she was gone. Nina playing her new piano piece, Riley demonstrating her newly mastered cartwheel, Mila reading a story she'd written about a princess who ran a big company and was very brave. Natalie watched them from her Tokyo hotel room at odd hours, texting Blake her responses because calling would wake the girls. Her texts got longer as the days wore on, missing them, missing him, missing the chaos of their life together. "I think I've forgotten how to be alone. My penthouse feels too quiet now, too empty. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. The house feels wrong when you're not here. The girls keep setting 5 places at dinner and then remembering. Riley asked if Tokyo is too far for you to come back. Tell her nothing is too far. I'm coming back to all of you." When she finally returned, exhausted but successful, she went straight from the airport to Blake's house. The girls were already asleep, but Blake was waiting on the porch swing, a cup of tea ready for her. "I missed you," she said, dropping beside him and curling into his side. "We missed you too." He kissed the top of her head. "The girls made you something." He led her inside to where a banner hung across the living room. "Welcome home, Natalie," in colorful, uneven letters, decorated with hand-drawn hearts and flowers. Natalie stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Home," she whispered. "Yeah," Blake said, understanding everything she couldn't say. "Home." That night, after she'd changed into borrowed pajamas and they were sitting on the couch with cups of tea, Natalie said the thing she'd been thinking for weeks. "I love them, your daughters. I know it's fast, and maybe I shouldn't say it yet, but I love them. Nina's determination, Mila's quiet wisdom, Riley's fierce loyalty, I love all of it." Blake set down his tea, turning to face her fully.
They love you too. You should hear them. Natalie this, Natalie that. You're basically a superhero in their eyes." "And their father?" asked Natalie quietly. "How does their father feel?" Blake took her face in his hands, his carpenter's hands that were rough but gentle. "Their father is completely, terrifyingly in love with you. Has been since you sat beside his sickbed, feeding him soup and dealing with his chaos like it was the most natural thing in the world." "That's good," Natalie said, her eyes wet. "Because I'm completely, terrifyingly in love with all of you." They kissed then, soft and sure, and somewhere above them 3 little girls peeked through the staircase railings and grinned at each other. 12 months later, on a crisp April evening, Blake stood in his workshop putting the final touches on a jewelry box. The triplets were with him, supposedly helping, but mostly getting sawdust in their hair. "Is it ready, Daddy?" Riley asked, bouncing on her toes. "Almost." Blake stepped back to examine the box. Olive wood with mother-and-pearl inlay, his finest work. Inside, nestled in velvet the girls had chosen, sat a vintage sapphire ring surrounded by small diamonds. "She's going to say yes. We love her. All of us."
"All of us," Mila added. Blake looked at his daughters, 8 now, growing so fast, and felt gratitude so intense it threatened to overwhelm him. They'd been through so much, lost so much, but they'd survived, more than survived. They'd thrived. And now, impossibly, they were about to gain someone new. Not a replacement for Amelia. Nothing could replace the love they'd had, but a new kind of love, equally precious. "Places, everyone," Riley commanded as they heard Natalie's car. Natalie entered to find the workshop transformed. Fairy lights hung from the rafters, and the path from the door was lined with photos of their journey. That first chaotic night, their first real date, family dinners, park adventures, quiet moments she didn't even know he'd captured. "What's all this?" she asked, her voice catching. Blake dropped to one knee. The girls followed suit, making her laugh through sudden tears. "Natalie Bennett," Blake began, his voice strong and sure, "you walked into our lives when we needed you most, though we didn't know it at the time. You've shown us that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when someone's sick, even when 3 little girls crash your date, even when life gets complicated." "We have a question," Nina said, producing the box. "A really important question," Mila added. "The most important question ever," Riley finished. Blake opened the box, revealing the ring. "Will you marry us? All of us?" Natalie looked at the 4 faces before her, her family, in every way that mattered. "Yes," she said, dropping to her knees to join them. "Yes to all of you, forever." The girls erupted in cheers, throwing their arms around both adults. And in that moment, in a workshop filled with sawdust and dreams, Blake thought about that night a year ago. Feverish and mortified, watching his daughters march off to save his date. Sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected moments.
2 years later, on a Saturday morning, Blake woke to the smell of burning pancakes. He stumbled downstairs to find chaos in the kitchen, Natalie at the stove, flour in her hair, while the girls tried to salvage breakfast. "We wanted to surprise you," 9-year-old Nina explained. "Mission accomplished, though maybe we should stick to cereal?" "Never," Natalie declared, wielding the spatula like a sword. "I'm a CEO. I've negotiated with world leaders. I can conquer pancakes." She couldn't. Not really, but they ate the slightly charred results anyway, laughing and syrup sticky together. Later that day at the courthouse, a judge finalized what had been true in their hearts for months. The adoption papers making Natalie legally the girl's mother. They'd been calling her Mom for a year already, but now it was official. "Any words for your new daughters?" the judge asked with a smile. Natalie looked at Nina, Mila, and Riley, her daughters, her girls. "Yeah, thank you for crashing that blind date. Best thing that ever happened to me." Blake's furniture business had expanded with Natalie's investment. He'd hired 3 apprentices and was donating even more pieces to local charities. Natalie's foundation, run in partnership with Blake, had opened its first technology center, with the girls serving as official kid consultants. Their story wasn't perfect. There were hard days, days when the girls missed their biological mother, days when Natalie's work demanded too much, days when Blake worried he wasn't enough. But they faced those days together, as a family. Because that's what they were now. A family built not from biology or perfection, but from choice. From 3 brave little girls who'd refused to let their father miss a chance at happiness. From a man who'd learned to love again. From a woman who discovered that the best things in life couldn't be scheduled or negotiated.
On their first anniversary, Natalie gave Blake a gift, a photograph from that first night, one Margaret had taken without them knowing. Blake feverish in bed, Natalie sitting beside him, 3 blonde heads visible at the door. They all looked surprised, uncertain, but somehow hopeful. "That's the moment," Natalie said softly, "the moment everything changed." Blake pulled her close. That's who Natalie was, someone who honored their past while building their future with them. "You know what I think?" Blake said. "What?" "I think sometimes the best love stories begin with 'Dad's sick, so we came instead.'" Natalie laughed, that wonderful laugh he never got tired of hearing. "Write that down. Nina's already planning to use our story for her creative writing assignment." Upstairs they heard a crash, followed by 3 voices in perfect unison. "We didn't do it!" Blake and Natalie looked at each other and grinned. "Should we—" she started. "Give them 5 minutes. They usually fix whatever they broke." They stood together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The tire swing swayed in the breeze. Somewhere inside, their daughters were probably making a bigger mess while fixing the first one. It was messy and chaotic and completely imperfect. It was absolutely perfect. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please don't let it end here. Let it remind you kindness still matters, compassion still changes lives, and hope is never wasted. Subscribe and be part of our Soul Lift Stories family, where every story lifts the spirit and reminds us that light always finds its way back. And if this moment moved you, share it, because sometimes sharing hope is the kindest thing we can do.